Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well today and staying healthy out there with everything going on. We're going to have a Bible devotional here. And to start things off, I'm going to show a clip from the classic comedy Billy Madison, starring Adam Sandler. Now, in this clip, Adam Sandler is talking to his dad because he just realized his dad basically paid off all his teachers to give him good grades. And so he never learned anything, but because of this, his dad doesn't trust him and doesn't trust him enough to let him run his super wealthy, lucrative business. And so Adam Sandler's trying to convince him otherwise, but I shall say no more. Let's watch the clip.
Dad!
Yeah, what?
Give me one more chance. I'll prove I can take over. I'll do anything it takes. I'll go back to high school and take the exams again, and I'll get my diploma all by myself.
Billy, it wasn't just high school. Do you remember that spelling bee you won in the first grade?
Oh, no, you didn't.
Rock. R-O-K.
Yeah, so what's your point?
R-O-C-K.
The C is silent. Okay. All right.
You know, I think sometimes we're a little like Billy Madison in that clip in our Christianity. I think we can care just about God bailing us out and getting our forgiveness of sins, but we don't care as much about actually learning from Jesus. And when we take that posture, we're unfit to take the keys of the kingdom. You know, the Sermon on the Mount has been something we've been studying out over the last several weeks, and we're going to continue with it in this devotional. But the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus trying to teach us how to spell rock, if I'm going to keep using that clip. It's Jesus trying to educate us on what life looks like when you live within God's realm. And today we're going to read Matthew 7, verses 7 through 12. And it's a passage where some scholarly commentators have wrestled with trying to understand exactly what Jesus is talking about. They find a silent C, so to speak, in this passage that they go, it's there, but why is that there? And we're going to talk about that in this devotional. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to turn to Matthew 7. We're going to begin reading in verse 7. It says, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you're evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him?" Now, if we were to stop reading there, it seems pretty obvious what Jesus is talking about in this passage, right? He's talking about our relationship with God. He's probably talking about prayer, asking for something in prayer, seeking, knocking on the door in prayer. I mean, it ends with your Father in heaven giving good gifts to those who ask him. He's talking about our relationship with him, our prayer life. But then we read the next verse, and the next verse is the silent C that commentators can wrestle over. Jesus says in verse 12, "So, in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets." I'll tell you, I've read some really smart Bible scholars talking about this, and they say that verse is completely out of place. And yet, it's not to Jesus. To him, it's very much connected. He goes, "Ask, seek, and knock. Your Father knows how to give good gifts." So, that's the same as therefore, treat others how you would want them to treat you. So, what does that have to do with our relationship with God? Did Jesus take some kind of radical left turn? What's going on here? Now, elsewhere in the Gospels, someone asks Jesus, "What's the greatest commandment there is?" And his response is, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind." And then he continues. He goes, "And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." In his answer, he's saying our love for God is intertwined with our love for others? If you're curious how this might work, let me ask you this. For those of you who are parents, let's say I came up to you and I said, I think you're a pretty cool person. Now your kids, I think they're pretty annoying and bratty. I don't like your kids at all, but you're fine. Do you think you and I would have an okay relationship, or would we have some things to talk about? Or let's say this, for those of you who don't have kids, what if I came up to you and I said, I think your mom's an idiot. You're pretty cool. Your mom, though, can't stand her. Do you think everything would be okay between you and I? Probably not. If any of you came up to me and said something like that about my kids, we'd have something to work through there. So just like you and I would have an issue if you said something about my kids or mistreated my kids and vice versa, God takes issue with us when we mistreat one of his kids, when we mistreat each other. And so our love for God is intertwined in our love for others. So anyways, back to this passage. Is Jesus talking about our relationship with God or our relationship with others? Which one is it? I think the answer is yes. He's talking about both. So what does this have to do with our relationship with God? Well, that one seems a little bit more obvious, right? God is a good Father. And some of you, depending on your situation right now, with everything going on with coronavirus and all the precautions and shutdowns and whatnot, some of you need to hear this. God is a good Father. He knows how to give you good things. Do you need peace? Ask for it. God knows how to give good gifts. Do you need patience during this time? Seek it. Your Father knows how to give good gifts. Do you need help? Knock on the door. Your Father knows how to give good gifts. Psalm 23 is probably the most famous psalm, and it paints a really compelling image and portrait of God's goodness. It starts off by saying, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Some translations will say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing." Dallas Willard has written extensively on this psalm and what it tells us about God. Here's what he says about this, especially this line of "the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He goes, "To think of the Lord as a shepherd is to come to understand the intensely personal, comforting, attentive, and providing nature of God's love and care for his flock of humanity." A shepherd comes to know everything and be so invested in their flock. Well, the Lord's our shepherd. He's intensely personal, comforting, attentive, and providing towards us. Psalm 23 goes on, "He makes me lay down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes," or some translations will say, "He restores my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake." Commenting on this, Dallas Willard writes, "The sheep of the flock are at peace, never lacking or left wanting any good thing." Why? Because they know their shepherd can be trusted to provide all that they need. Fear is gone, needs satisfied, peace abounds. Back to Psalm 23. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Dallas Willard writing about this, and I think this is a time where it certainly feels like we're in a dark valley in society, and coronavirus is making a lot of people fearful. Dallas Willard writes, "Such goodness, provision, protection, soul care, restoration, righteousness, and flourishing that life with the shepherd provides allows us to face shadowy dangers and uncertainties that threaten life." And this question he asks, ask it of yourself. Can we envision being freed to the point where not a single thing on earth, above the earth or below the earth, could cause dread to creep into our hearts. This is the kind of shepherd, provider that God is. Then Psalm 23 ends with this: "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." You know, this passage we read, Matthew 7, especially verses 7 through 11, it's Jesus reinforcing the goodness of God that Psalm 23 speaks of. And because God is good, we ought to bring our requests before him. You can trust in him. He can provide for you. He is a good Father. Now, what does asking, seeking, and knocking have to do with our relationships with one another? Well, I think this passage reflects how we ought to treat one another. We make requests, not demands, when we have a need. If we humbly request for people to help us whenever we have a need, more often than not, we get help. We get what we're asking for. As Jesus states, we, even though we fall so short of God, we know how to give good gifts to each other. And so just as you would want the respect of a request and not a demand when people approach you, and treat others the same way. Listen, given our current circumstances and as these things go on over the next several weeks, some of you are going to have needs. And I want to encourage you that as you have those needs, first bring them to God in prayer. Bring them to your good shepherd, to God who can give you good gifts. Trust in his goodness and his provision, and bring him to him in prayer. And then secondly, bring those needs to our faith community. Talk to those in your house church about it. Perhaps a close friend in the church. Bring it to the leadership. Let us know your needs. And as you hear of needs, perhaps you're not someone who will be in need, but you're in a position to be able to help others. So as you hear of needs, respond how you would want others to respond. Be willing to be generous with the good gifts God has provided for you. You know, I received a call yesterday from a college student in our campus ministry where she works. The store was shutting down for a few weeks, and so she had access to a lot of extra food and goods and stuff. And she wanted to know, hey, who might need some of these things? Who can I help? This is what happens. This is the attitude and the perspective we get when the goodness of God inspires us to be good to other people. When we realize how good God is, it makes us want to give good gifts to others. Because how we treat each other is intertwined with our relationship with God. We serve a good Father who knows how to give good gifts. So let's go to him with our requests, especially during these uncertain times. But let's also imitate our good Father, looking to give good gifts to those in need around us. And may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times and in every way. The Lord be with you all.